What's up, y'all? This is Hunter Knight presenting my Learn by Teaching project. I think mine's going to be a little interesting because essentially everything that I'll be talking about is actually being applied to my movement to help sustain itself and bolster support, which is why I really appreciated this class. Had a great time taking it. Essentially, my movement is called Legalize Georgia. I started off with the concept of just a movement through ways that cannabis prohibition has affected my life personally. And I figured, okay, short and sweet title. Couple weeks go by, I'm making social media accounts and stuff, and I find that somebody already had the name Legalize Georgia for an account, but they had their own merch line attached to the name. So I figured, wouldn't it be more profitable for this individual if his merchandise had a message behind it? Which is going to go into our first part right here. So essentially, with every single movement, one of the main roadblocks that most run into is funding. In this capitalist society, we're all required to contribute to a job of some sorts that takes time, energy, to gain money, to survive. One of the primary needs for movements is some type of economic cash flow, whether it be through grants, donations, or like what we're doing, having some sort of line of income to sustain itself. Essentially, with Legalize Georgia, we provide people with a merch brand, that essentially makes people who either support, use, or just overall think it's a good idea with cannabis, we have created a line for them to feel good about it, feel loud and proud about it as well. And I'll show you right here. So right here is one of our t-shirts, super poppy logo, super good quality too. But essentially, what we do is we sell these shirts, and I believe we're making an online store in the coming weeks. But we sell these shirts for a reasonable price, and we go out to our local communities. We'll go to brewery events. We'll just go to parks that allow us to table there. We'll go to certain events. You might even catch us on Georgia State campus once in a while. But essentially, what we want people to know is that when they purchase a shirt, hat, socks, rolling tray, whatever they want from us, they know that not only is that item they bought attached to a larger movement bigger than themselves, but that money that they're spending is going towards something that is going to enrich the community around them. So that tackles a lot of the things that we learned in class. For example, one being garnering support for said movement. The logo is flashy, it's poppy. A lot of people will just recognize it from staring at it or just seeing it in the distance. That's what we want. We want people to attach this logo to the fact that there is something being done to alter cannabis legislation in the state of Georgia. This is my cat. So basically, the next part that we want to talk about is media. What's a way to get a movement out there that actually will get people's eyes on it? One of the most previous, or recent rather, discussions we spoke about in class is media coverage. Last week, on the week of 420, the glorious stoner holiday, we got the privilege of being featured on a news program called Newsy. Newsy is what's perceived as a nonpartisan news organization. However, I do think that they have a little bit of a left-wing tilt on their coverage. They did an entire package on why southern states are so slow to enact positive cannabis policies. So essentially, with Georgia being what many in the country assume is going to be the last state to legalize if it doesn't get fixed federally, they wanted to know from the ground what's going on. Because in the previous session, we are in a roundabout with legislation to enact a medical cannabis infrastructure for the state. And we've essentially gone nowhere while dealing with this for, 3 or 4 years now. So I'm going to play that package for you next. And what I do want to focus on is, again, this is a nonpartisan news network that does have a left-wing tilt. The coverage that they're part of, the news that package that they set us up with before our interview was phenomenal. They interviewed elderly citizens from Georgia. They interviewed young Black individuals from the city of Atlanta. So you get two perspectives from both different social dynamics of the state. It was very, very great. And we were grateful that we were featured on something that gracious of a news network, because as we've seen with different media comparisons, there's definitely pros and cons to how a a media network can portray your organization. It could be in a positive light or a negative one. Many would say it was a neutral perspective, but I really do think that they were on our side and we're very in support of progressive policies. So I'm going to roll that video for you now. And yeah, this is just a perfect example of how important media coverage is to a movement.
So we're talking with Hunter Knight. He's with Legalize Georgia, an advocacy group pushing for legalization right here in Georgia. So thank you for being here with us today. Where does Georgia in particular stand right now as far as medical marijuana, which usually is the first step before actual legalization?
First of all, thank you for having me. In terms of medical marijuana, Georgia is in quite a tight spot. We currently have a program that allows people with qualifying conditions to get access to low, highlight the word low, THC oil. However, there's currently no way for these patients to access it. And personally, the conditions are pretty severe at end stage. It's great that they're getting considered for this program, but it doesn't go far enough. We've awarded 6 licenses to companies that produce and sell this low THC oil. But we've been in gridlock for about 9 months now. And we're currently receiving protests and litigation from over 50 companies that tried to get approved, but were not picked. And there's currently no target date for this to be resolved. We tried to pass legislation in this previous session, but we just couldn't come to an agreement.
So you do political outreach for Legalize Georgia. So when you're speaking with lawmakers, what are some of the common pushbacks they have on legalization, particularly given that so many other states are already highlighting the pros of legalizing it?
Absolutely. You know, we hear a lot of the same tired arguments that we've probably heard in the 90s, even the 80s, that have been disproven by the dozens of states you just highlighted that have legalized. Things like adolescent use increases, violent crime increases, intoxicated driving increases. And the one that I feel has been the most debunked, the fact that it is a gateway drug to more serious substances. It's just not true.
Sure. And so is there anything specifically about the South regarding legislation, why the South has been slower than other parts of the country? Does it all come down to politics?
Politics is a big part of it. I do think there's a lack of education with some of the constituency of the state and a lot of the legislators. Many states, red and blue, that have had progressive cannabis policy, they were able to receive that through ballot initiatives. And unfortunately, most of the southern states you've highlighted don't have that electoral process in play. While 2/3 of Americans do want legalized cannabis, we're seeing a majority of the pushback from our governor, Brian Kemp, and our Speaker of the House. They made it clear that even decrim just isn't possible in their eyes, and they certainly don't want to talk about recreational use.
So what will be the ultimate driver in changing the laws, if ever? Would it be the potential tax revenue, or do you see another route to getting it legalized?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Georgia is a farming state. I think while tax revenue is a great optic to be looking at, we need to understand how this can enrich jobs, how we can get farmers involved, how everyone can benefit from this in multiple layers. And that's one thing Legalize Georgia wants to talk about. We want to educate people on how this can bring effect to everybody, whether you choose to inhale or not.
All right, that's a good point. Hunter Knight with Legalize Georgia, thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thank you. Stay peachy, everyone.
So there you have it. That's honestly a perfect example of a news network portraying an organization with a positive frame. We were super gracious for Newsy to let us on their program. I was blown beyond, gosh, it was just, that was the first time I've ever appeared on the news as the primary interviewee, if so to speak. But we were very aware and prepared to be hit with a completely different range of questions. You know, while this was a great interview, it definitely could have went sideways if we were on a more conservative network that didn't have progressive stances towards cannabis legislation. And we were definitely aware of that, and we were prepared for any curveball they might hit. They were gracious enough to provide us with the questions beforehand on the interview, so we were more than prepared. But again, that is the amount of readiness that an organization must have when presenting itself on the news network. You never know what you could be hit with. And when that camera is on you, when you were on that screen in that panel, anything that you say or do or mess up will portray that movement for life, or as long up until you get another set of coverage to overshadow the one that maybe didn't go too well. But we think we did a great job. My team prepared me super well. Kudos to them. And again, this is just a perfect example of how when a movement starts itself, it needs to be prepared and agile in navigating these spaces with media. And I think we did great. And from here on out, when we present ourselves to legislators, to other news networks, they can understand that there's a sense of professionalism with Legalize Georgia. There's a stereotype with individuals that want to bring up progressive policies around cannabis. There's some people think they just want to get high. You know, some people think they just want to sit around on their couch and dope around all day with some weed. And, you know, that might be some people's thing. But what Legalize Georgia just proved there with that news segment is that it is completely possible to be aware of the social inequities surrounding cannabis and be able to enjoy it and articulate the issues to a broader audience like we just did. So again, I am super thankful for this class because it showed me the importance of media coverage and how things like that should be taken into account. Going back to the beginning of this video, also funding, you know, money doesn't grow on trees. You know what I'm saying? So the fact that we were able to come up with an agreement to make this merchandise that I had just shown earlier available to individuals who do support the cause. I've sold shirts to people who have never smoked in their life. I've sold shirts to people who hate the smell of marijuana. But I think everybody can come around and gather around the central idea that this is a plant, and the fact that it has the potential to ruin lives, and the fact that it's held back from benefiting lives. It's just not fair or necessary. So yeah, thank you for watching, and stay peachy.